Hello guys and welcome to another video. The 7th episode of Percy Jackson and the Olympians just came out, so let's talk about it. I am going to go very deep into spoiler territory, so for those of you who want a non-spoilery review, I will say this. This was probably my least favorite episode out of the 7 episodes that we've gotten so far. Not only was it the one with the least Percy-Beth interaction, that's impossible, the first one they hadn't met yet. Okay, I think this might be the episode with the worst pacing, probably because half of the episode is a random flashback, and the other main reason being that there's so many opportunities for cool action scenes and they just swerve around them and kiss them goodbye. So without further ado, let's get into spoiler territory. I have to preface this by saying that I still enjoyed the episode. I laughed a couple of times, I shrieked in excitement in some other places, but this really wasn't my favorite at all, and I'm curious to see because I saw a lot of people hating episode 6, and I thought episode 6 had some really high highs. It has some, low lows. I overall really enjoyed it, and that ending and that beginning were just so perfect that, I can't complain about episode 6. However, episode 7, for now, I think is at the bottom of my ranking. Maybe next to episode 1. I don't know. Episode 1 also had some great moments.
The important thing is not to panic. I'm not panicking.
Grover?
Right? I'm also
Percy's
definitely not panicking.
And Grover is.
I feel very good about how we're doing so far.
Grover!
What?
Grover, why is there half a goat in your pants?
Like I said in my previous video for episode number 6, no one, least of all me, was expecting for Crusty to actually appear in the show because, in my opinion, he adds nothing to the story. He's just a last mini side quest that the kids face because they're being followed by a gang of human teenagers and they can't hurt them in any way because their weapons don't work against them. So they run and they go into this mattress store where they meet Crusty. And obviously they have to fight him, which is not the case here. Well, in the books, Crusty does trick, I don't remember, one of the gang into falling into the beds and being stretched to their ideal height. Here we just get Annabeth with the invisibility cap pushing him onto the bed. That's it. That's literally it. Instead of getting an action piece where they have to be witty or outsmart the monster, no, she just pushes him and he gets trapped by his own bed, which isn't even trying to stretch him into ideal height. He just gets wrapped in the blanket, which doesn't seem very scary. And right afterwards, Grover comes in and is like, are we gone? Is it okay? It was funny, but at the same time, quite underwhelming for a first scene of the 2-part finale. So while it makes sense for Sally to have taught Percy the Greek myths, I think it really takes away not only from his character and how he is perceiving this world for the first time, with naivete and complete ignorance to his surroundings, which then leads to humorous and action-packed situations. Instead of getting that, we're getting Percy knowing everything in advance, which means that there's no action to be heard of. They don't get themselves into sticky situations because of Percy or because of their general lack of knowledge, and they know the danger before the viewer knows the danger. Therefore, it never seems like they are in danger. Therefore, there is no intrigue whatsoever. I feel like we always know that our trio is going to win because they're quite smart and they're quite capable, and with Percy's sass and knowledge and Annabeth's invisibility cap, there hasn't been one single challenge that they haven't been able to face. The only one that we've gotten is the Chimera, and honestly, it was over so quick that I didn't even have time to be afraid for Percy. It was a cool scene though. So while I know Percy was never dumb in the books, and that's not what I want from him, I want a Percy who is a little bit out of his depth, and that's not what we're getting here. So the next scene after Krusty's is revealed that Krusty's, for some reason, is one of the entrances to the Underworld. I don't know why they relied on him to keep it controlled, because obviously you just push him onto one of the beds and you're done. I think they really need better security in the Underworld. They get there and Grover is kind of panicky, but not more than usual. Honestly, it didn't stick out to me as him being particularly anxious, but Annabeth finds a red squeaky ball, one of those that you can go like this to calm yourself down, and he's like, oh thanks, I feel better. Which, if you've read the books, which I'm guessing you have since you're here, if you you read the books, you can guess that this is supposed to be the red ball that Annabeth got in Waterland, and then she uses to not fight off Cerberus, but to get him under control. To tell you the truth, it was a bit shoehorned in there, but I still enjoyed the reference. Afterwards, our trio walks right into the Underworld, and I have to say, the special effects were kind of cool. I did like the design of how it looked. So our trio is hiding behind a rock, and Percy is looking at this landscape, and he actually says, "We're not in Kansas anymore," which is a reference to the flashback that's also going out throughout this episode. We'll talk about the flashback later because there's a lot of things to say about the flashback. But yes, he references not in Kansas anymore, and Annabeth, who's in front of him, she turns back. She's like, "Percy, we were in Kansas 4 days ago. Focus." And this just goes to show that Annabeth, she hasn't watched a single movie in her life, and also she hasn't left camp, so references just fly over her head, and Percy's like, "What? Never mind." So I think in his mind he was like, okay, when we go watch a movie, The Wizard of Oz is at the top of our list, and I just love that for him. I hope that later on in like the next episode, when they're back at camp and safe, we get like a flyaway mention to them watching that together, and that's one of our only Perciveth interactions for the day, unfortunately. So then we see Charon, the guy who helps people, dead people, cross the river Styx, but he's not crossing the river, and our trio doesn't cross the river either. Even though the river is there, they're already on the side they're supposed to be for some reason, so they just follow him. They follow him, and there's a line of dead people, and this is one of the most humorous moments from the episode that I quite enjoyed. And Percy's like, "Excuse me, we're with someone over there. Yeah, excuse me, let us through." And then like 5 seconds after being like a very polite little boy trying to make his way up a queue, right after that, he's like, "People who wait in line are suckers." He tells Grover that he needs to come more into the city with him. So basically the New Yorker inside him like came out and was like, "I'm not waiting in line," just started elbowing dead people out of the way. Fair enough, there are dead people. Once they get to Charon's like, "You're not dead." And here I was expecting to get that. We are dead. We all died inside a bathtub. The three of us together at the same time. But instead of getting that iconic line, we get something that maybe makes more sense and was also funny. But I wanted that iconic line. But instead of saying that, Percy says that, well, we're all dying in one way or another. It was funny, but it wasn't the three of them dying in the same bathtub at the same time funny. Before even watching this episode, I told my brother they are going to lose a pearl, and it's not going to be Percy. And then Percy proceeds to divide the pearls among them because obviously it would be safer if each of them has one pearl. Who loses the pearl? Grover, immediately. I thought that would have more of an emotional payoff, especially because it was Grover. I'm hoping to get it later on, but no emotional payoff. No Grover being like, "I always do something that makes my quest fail. I'm always the one holding people back." Obviously, I'm not saying that I think that of Grover, but Grover thinks that of himself because of what happened with Talia. Yes, I'm sticking with the T pronunciation for Talia. Fight me on it, because I know you will. Obviously, Karen doesn't care that they're all dying either way, in some way or another, so he blows a whistle, which you can barely hear, and Percy's like, "Okay, here, have these golden drachmas. You can buy another whistle with it." And the whistle was to call Cerberus, which is a clever nod, foreshadowing to Miss Solari and how Percy calls her with a whistle from the Underworld in the 4th book, Battle of the Labyrinth. We get to see Cerberus for the first time, and Cerberus was so cute. He was definitely my favorite part of this episode because the 3 huge heads in like that, not tiny body, but tiny in comparison of the 3 heads, he just looked so cute. And I love the breed of dog, and it was exactly like he was described in the book, so I was really happy about that. So Cerberus comes running after them, and the first thing he does, he swallows Grover up with one of his faces. They split up. Cerberus goes after Percy, and Percy takes out Riptide, ready to fight, and then Cerberus, the cute boy that he is, starts like scratching his ear because Annabeth is scratching him, which was very cute and a very fun callback to Annabeth playing with him with the red ball in the books. And for a second, I was a bit confused because we had the ball. Why not just do that? Why show the ball if you're gonna find another way for Annabeth to subdue Cerberus? But the ball will come in handy later on. So when Cerberus is subdued, Annabeth is like, "Okay, I can't keep this going on much longer. Grover, you fly Percy up there, then come back to get me." It's very funny seeing Grover like pull Percy by his arms like this all the way up to the tower. I think he would have dislocated something, honestly, but it was funny to watch anyway. And of course, halfway through, once they get up there, Annabeth is like, "Oh, I'm gonna fall." Poof, can't subdue this guy any longer, can't scratch him anymore. But Annabeth did take away the ball from Grover at the beginning of this episode because he was making too many squeaky sounds in the underworld, which is obviously not something they should do because that alerts everyone in their vicinity. Annabeth, currently in possession of the red ball, and being the very smart girl she is, she throws the ball at Percy, who catches it immediately. Love to see it. Obviously, Cerberus dives at the wall where Grover and Percy are, and then falls back down. You're like, oh my god, where is Annabeth? Well, Annabeth is hanging from the side of the wall there because she's a very smart girl and she threw the ball on purpose, knowing that Cerberus would jump after it. We get a really fun moment. Percy going down and getting Annabeth, like pulling her up by the hand. And obviously, we're all thinking this. If you've read Mark of Athena, you were thinking and you're like, wow, a long way down, a very hard fall. Not fun, but still, I like to see these glimpses of the future of Percival, even though they're quite tragic. So after that great, very fun parallel that we have, they go into Asphodel. And Asphodel is people turning into trees. I liked the visual, but I think they could have done something more, like more eerie music or something. Our trio was screaming at each other. No, they weren't screaming, but they were speaking very loudly. So you could see they weren't afraid, so I wasn't afraid. And I think that's one of the main problems with this show. The trio knows more than they should know. Therefore, they aren't usually that scared because they know how to get out of the situation, or at least they know not to get into it. I just wish they were more afraid. And since monsters, at the beginning, normal people, seeing like a grown adult isn't that threatening, to me at least, even if they're like saying scary things, I'm like, you're just like a middle-aged, mediocre person. Why should I be afraid of you? And they don't do anything to back up the words. So I'm like, at least threaten me, at least like cut off a finger, do something. I want to be afraid. Obviously, I know that this is a show for middle schoolers and under, so I'm not going to complain about it not being scary enough. I mean, I am going to complain, but I'm going to also understand why it's not. So we're at Asphodel, and suddenly Cerberus has come back because he's got bored of chasing the ball down the river Styx. Our trio begins to run. Grover and Percy split up, as we saw in the preview, and we're like, okay, are we leaving Annabeth behind? No, we're not, because they find her again, and Annabeth has started to get rooted into Asphodel. Grover's like, that means you have a regret. I know she's just 12, but who doesn't have a regret ever? I think it's impossible to live a life without regrets. It would be awesome. It's impossible. So obviously she has one regret. She probably has more than one. I think that regret is probably linked to the memory that Hermes would have shown her in the previous episode had he managed to touch her hand like he did with Percy. So they have to have Annabeth explain that in the next episode, right? Because I feel like there's too much hanging in the air, unspoken, and Annabeth has to explain it to us. It can't all just be subtext. I imagine this has to do with her father or with Talia, but they have to tell us. Please spell it out for me. It might even have to do with Luke, but how are we supposed to know when they don't tell us anything? So she's there and they're like, okay, we're going to leave you. Annabeth, obviously, keen on sacrificing herself as much as Percy is. She's like, okay, guys, leave me. I'll distract Cerberus for a while and then I'll leave. And we're like, okay, how are you gonna do that? You're literally rooted to the ground. They don't even try to cut her out of it because she's like, it's too strong. So you tried once with a knife and you're like, okay, done. Also, one of the problems, like the pacing is weird and you're like, why haven't you tried more stuff? So they're like, this is the only way. I'm like, is it really? Like, I haven't seen you try anything else. So, okay, if you say so, I'm gonna have to believe it. But it's the same thing with like the throne with Hephaestus. Like, you could have tried to get the shield off, but no, you didn't. You just went for the self-sacrifice thing. It goes to show that Percy and Annabeth are perfect for each other because they jump at any opportunity at becoming martyrs for each other. Anyway, Percy is reluctant to go, but since it's just season 1, he decides to like, okay, she can take care of herself. I'm gonna go save my mom because that's what Annabeth tells him to do. I think Percy in any other season, or at least starting from season 3, would not have left her there. But obviously, season 1 Percy, he has to go take care of his mom. He leaves, and then in the distance, we see like a blue-white light appear, and Annabeth drops into the ground. We have to assume that she used the pearl. It's weird because we couldn't even see Cerberus. So what's this whole thing about? I'll stay behind and distract Cerberus, like hold him off. You literally didn't. You disappeared before Cerberus appeared. Also, doesn't matter because they get to the desert before Cerberus even shows up. So that whole thing, like, I'm gonna sacrifice myself, stay behind, no, it was completely useless because it doesn't happen. They tell us it happens, but it doesn't. So I found it weird that we didn't see that. Why say it and don't show it? So once again, the trio splits up. Obviously, Annabeth gone forever. Percy and Grover walk into the desert, and I feel like a lot of people are complaining that the trio keeps splitting up. We see either Percy and Annabeth and then Grover by himself, or just Percy and Grover and Annabeth nowhere to be seen. And that's true. That's also one of my main complaints so far with the show. I've been really enjoying it, so complaints are more like constructive criticism for next season, because I do want more content. I am generally enjoying this. I just, obviously I can nitpick at something that's my favorite book series ever, so I'm gonna nitpick, okay? I'm gonna nitpick. So if there's one thing that they could change from season 1 to season 2 besides having more action, is having the trio be together more. Now that I'm saying this out loud, it's gonna be impossible. If you know the premise of season 2, impossible, don't want them to change that. But still, I would have liked to see the three of them as a trio more. Obviously, we know that this is going to be Tartarus. Suddenly, Grover gets sucked into a huge gaping hole in the middle of the desert by his flying shoes. Surprise! This was as much of an action scene as we got in the whole episode. Grover getting dragged into like a massive pit. And it was exciting. Percy has to hang on with Riptide, which we hadn't seen in a while. Just by hanging there, the shoes fly off by themselves into Tartarus, which I feel like is what happened in the book. And then they're like, oh my god, we almost just got sucked into Tartarus, traumatic, and Percy like slumps down and you hear something metal in his backpack. And this doesn't happen this way in the books. In the books, he realizes that the backpack that Ares gave him has the Master Bolt in it once he was already talking to Hades. Here, he realizes before, which is something that's been happening all throughout the season. Percy is also one step ahead of everyone. While being like several steps behind everyone, he's still several steps in front of his book counterpart. This change is very interesting because, as Grover points out, that's it. That's the quest. They literally went all the way into the Underworld for nothing. Although, as Percy says, the vault just appeared there once they were in the Underworld, so I'm guessing even if he had opened the backpack before, it wouldn't have been there. It was just to incriminate them and, to give it to Hades or whatever they wanted. No, actually, to bring it to Kronos, obviously. So I'm guessing it wasn't such a waste. So they couldn't really have turned back and gone to Olympus without going to the Underworld because the bolt wouldn't have appeared at the backpack. However, the change is interesting because now it gives Percy autonomy. It makes Percy have to choose his mom over the quest, because they could turn back and give the bolt to Zeus. They could go and stop the war. They could choose Olympus, but he chooses his mom because Percy, say it with me, is a mama's boy. So they go to the palace and then they're on like a rock elevator, kind of gave Avatar the Last Airbender bossing say vibes. But they get up there and they're like looking at the throne room, no one's there, and you hear like a clip of someone walking over there, and it's Hades. Personality wise is somewhere in the middle of his book counterpart and of his movie counterpart, and somewhere in there's like a dash of the Disney Hercules Hades, just like the tiniest dash. I thought he was really funny, like kind of weird, like he wasn't giving 100% of the character he was trying to give, kind of restrained. That's the performance that I got from this actor, but still he had a couple of funny lines when he said like, I'm not in cahoots with anyone. Love that line. Obviously, very Hades thing to say because obviously he doesn't do cahooting with anyone because he hates everyone. And also the fact that he made like a nautical joke and he's like, I see you, to Percy to break the ice with him. I thought that was really funny and such a like a random thing to do. His relationship with Percy here is so different from the one in the books that now I'm very intrigued to see Percy going into the Underworld in the 5th book to get, the curse of Achilles, to get, to get the curse of Achilles. Hades not treating him very well. So Percy's like, dude, why are you trying to start a war between the gods? I know you were planning to steal the bolt with Ares. Why are you doing this, man? Just give me my mom back. And Hades is just like, what are you saying? And then they explain like, we have the bolt. Ares put it in my backpack. And he's like, well, I actually wanted you to come here to make a deal because you stole my Helm of Darkness, the one that allows you to become invisible and that allowed you to steal the vault. So you're like, oh. what? You know, the conspiracy just keeps getting deeper and deeper in this show. Like, it was Clarice who stole the vault. She stole it for Ares, who stole it for Hades, who as his the voice that we've been seeing in Percy's dreams. Like, what is going on? But at the same time, someone stole Hades's Helm of Darkness and Hades knows nothing about the Master Bolt? Crazy, man. So after a while, they both discover that someone stole the Helm of Darkness, probably the same someone who stole the vault, who we still don't know who it was, but it definitely wasn't Hades, and Hades just wants the helm back in exchange for Percy's mom. Then Hades is like, ask me for sanctuary. And he's actually offering them to help them because they know that it was probably Kronos, and Percy comes to this conclusion all by himself. Very, very drastic change from the books, where it's actually Chiron and Annabeth who are thinking this, but don't want it to even say it out loud. For Percy to say Kronos in the Underworld right after almost getting sucked into Tartarus is actually crazy. And while I wouldn't have been opposed to Grover once again saying that he should be the one to stay in the Underworld, Percy should take his mom like he did in the movies. I know we hate the movies, I hate them too, but I think that made sense. And it would have made even more sense since in this version, Grover lost one of the pearls, meaning they had 3 instead of 4, meaning that Sally couldn't be saved. So I think that would have made a lot of sense, but obviously we need Grover for the finale, so I'm not gonna complain too much about it, just gotta mention it here and move on. So each of them take one of the pearls that they have, they squish them, and they go up to the surface world. So it was quite uneventful, honestly, in the Underworld. Hermes being like, most heroes, or nearly all of them, never come out again. And we're like, well, it didn't seem too hard, honestly. Like, they got there, they did their thing, kind of, and then they left. So honestly, the Underworld was probably the most underwhelming thing. Like, visually, I loved it. And I loved that it didn't look like the Christian version of hell. So good to see. But at the same time, I was like, I need more. Like, I need more explanation and also less exposition, but at the same time more feeling, and at the same time more action. Like, give me a great balance of those and I'll take it. I'm asking for a lot. So before we get to what happens after that, let's talk about the flashback that we've been seeing all throughout episode 7. So this episode, we see a flashback of Sally Jackson taking Percy from one school to another. And this is quite heartbreaking because she's like, Percy, we have to get out of the car. You have to go to the school. And Percy locks the door. He doesn't want to come out. This boy, this little tiny little baby boy, he actually says, I don't remember the exact quote, but he's like, why are you trying to push me away? Or why are you trying to get rid of me? I would never do that to you. Our poor mama's boy. He feels so neglected by Sally, who at the same time is only like looking out for him and trying to do the best she can for her only child. It's very sad. Now that I'm older, I can feel for Sally so much because she had such a hard time while Percy was growing up. She loved him so much and she wanted to keep him close, but she didn't want him to go to Camp Half-Blood because she didn't want them like infesting his brain. She didn't want him to grow up with like that. She explains it in the show once they're having like a milkshake, and then she calls them beside and she's like, I don't want your family to ruin him. I want him to grow up strong and good, which makes sense. But at the same time, not going to Camp Half-Blood and not being able to stay with her, she has to push him away, throw him out of her house every school year, and that feels really bad to Percy. So baby Percy obviously can't know any of it, and he wouldn't understand it even if he could. And she's about to cry, and she throws a matchstick inside a milkshake. As soon as I saw the fire, I was like, what's she gonna do with it? Then I was like, oh my god, she's going to have a burnt offering for the gods. And in like 1 nanosecond after that match hit the milkshake, Poseidon was there. And like, if that doesn't prove that he's a huge simp, I don't know what will. But he's there and they talk to each other, and not once do they look at each other, or at least Sally doesn't look at him at all, because I feel like looking at him for her would have been too painful and she could not have been able to look away. So she was like, just look straight, talk about your son, and that's it. I don't understand why this is what Hermes made Percy think of when he touched him, because we never see Percy be affected by this. Our Percy in our timeline, like our 12-year-old Percy. Obviously, it affected him as a kid, but he didn't understand it, and I feel like he would have understood it better as a kid. So if we could see Percy actually remembering this flashback, it would have made more sense. But we just get a flashback, and we just get our normal Percy parallel each other, but never interacting, which I think is weird, because if you have a flashback, I feel like it should be because one of the characters is remembering something that has to do with that flashback, or a flashback that helps us understand the character better, which it did, but since it doesn't change anything, it was kind of weird. But the most important part of the flashback is that at the end, when Poseidon's like, no, I can't talk to him yet, he has a very cute short monologue, and while he's monologuing, we see Percy appear on the sand on the beach while Poseidon is monologuing about Percy finding his fate and meeting his destiny. We see a hand that's obviously Annabeth's, and Annabeth helps Percy stand up, and obviously it's because she is his destiny, she's his fate, and she's the one that Percy chooses. And thank you, Tumblr, for helping me realize this, because I was so immersed in the episode, I'm like, oh my god, that's Annabeth, that I didn't put two and two together. But honestly, that was my favorite part of the flashback, those two things like merging there at the end. I was like, yes, this is what I want to see, this is what I'm here for, this foreshadowing, this like subtle hints at their future relationship and even their current relationship, because even with Percabeth not being romantic, they mean everything to each other. They're best friends. So they're so important to each other, and they're still each other's fates, even without the romanticism added into it. The episode kind of ends there. They stand up, and who's there waiting looking all cool in like his jacket. He has such a cool jacket. I love it. With his like sword over his shoulder. It's Ares. Of course it's Ares. It's always been Ares. And I can't believe Ares is one of my favorite gods, if not probably my favorite god in this whole show. But he stole the show for me. He's just so cool, and I love how he's acting in the show. So funny to me that this guy's an actual wrestler like John Cena, but he's stealing the show here, so way to go. I don't know what your name is, but I love you, at least in the show. So he's there, and then Percy gets riptide out. He gets into a stance like, oh my god, I'm gonna fight you. And honestly, we haven't seen Percy train with a sword ever in the show. Obviously in the books we get a little montage, and he fights against Luke, who's the best swordsman at camp, and they're like, oh Percy, you're a quick study, you're gonna be maybe even better than Luke if you practice more. We don't get that in the book. We've just seen him in archery lessons and in the forges. I guess we did see him in Capture the Flag, but honestly, that's the first time we saw him. We didn't see him training, so that's the only time we've seen Percy use a sword against people with swords, because obviously he's been using it against monsters who don't have swords, which is completely different. So this is the first time we're gonna see Percy sword fight another person with a sword for his life. And it's not only a god, it's the god of war, who is also double his size, even triple, maybe. It's not looking good, honestly. That shot, I was like, Percy's gonna die like this. Like, he does not stand a chance. So I'm really looking forward to this actions piece. I hope it lasts at least 5 minutes. All in all, and that's not even asking for much. We do have Poseidon in the background again saying that he's going to stand with Percy, and then we have Percy and the sea behind him. So obviously the sea is going to assist Percy like it does in the book to help him beat Ares. But I do want this to be realistic. Like, this version of Percy, he has fought the same number of monsters as Percy, and he has gotten like through them quicker than Book Percy. But Book Percy has so much more prowess with a sword by this point that show Percy that I feel like we're in danger. Obviously Percy's gonna win, but I'm still so scared for him, and they better make this believable, because this is not gonna be this like this. So I think I explained myself there. And then of course we get a preview like in every other episode, and the thing that stood out to me the most in this preview, Percy and Luke walking through the forest, and you can see fireworks through the trees. This is leading me to like two different hypotheses. This could be just a random scene before Percy and Annabeth watch the fireworks together and they say goodbye to Grover. Yes. Or it can be right after that, Luke goes to talk to them. He's like, I want to talk to Percy, whatever, Percy, come with me. And then the whole thing, spoilers, The whole thing with the Luke being the lightning thief is revealed right after or while the fireworks are going off for the 4th of July. I hope that we still get Percy and Annabeth watching them together, saying goodbye to Grover, but I think it would make sense to merge those two scenes and to have the reveal in the same day. But at the same time, the 4th of July isn't the last day of summer, and I do really love a last day of summer reference, seeing that is one of the best songs in the musical, and the last day of summer is the absolute best portrayal that we've gotten of Luke so far. It doesn't pay to be a good kid, a good son. So good. Go listen to the Lightning Thief musical if you haven't yet. Do yourself a favor. It's so good. And I do have a ranking of all the songs, so if you want to know, you can know. We also have a scene with Chiron narrating and saying something to Percy. We see Percy go up to Olympus, and we see a little bit of the fight with Ares, I think, or maybe that was just the ending. All in all, we don't see much. We just know that in the next episode, we're going to go to Olympus to finish what we started. Oh, Percy is shown to have, or Annabeth, one of them is shown to have the Helm of Darkness after their fight with Ares, I think. Percy, I don't know how he's going to do all this because he also needs to go back to the Underworld to give the helm, get his mother. In the books, he just needs to get his mother, so Zeus just like magics her up, but I don't know if Zeus would bring the Helm of Darkness back to Hades. Maybe Hermes will be there and he'll be like, dude, I'm the messenger god, I'll bring it down. So that might make sense, especially since it was his son who stole the lightning bolt, even though they don't know that yet. I'm very interested in seeing if Percy gets to camp and accuses Clarice of stealing the bolt, if Clarice is going to be like put in jail, at least until the 4th of July where Luke exposes himself. That would be very funny. Very sad for Clarice. But if they want to give her more screen time, that's the way to do it. Like, put Clarice in jail. I mean, they have already missed the solstice, so them getting back to camp by 4th of July wouldn't be that weird. So maybe this is just me going full conspiracy theory because we just have one episode left, so why not? At this point, anything could happen. None of us knows how this is going to end. So the solstice came and went. Therefore, we know that the date is after June 21st. Could be anywhere from June 21st to July 4th. So I'm guessing it's still like within that week because, you know, I think the war would have already started if it wasn't. So let's say it's like June 23rd right now. So given that it's June 23rd or 22nd, it could take Percy like a couple of days to solve the thing with Olympus and then go back to Camp Half-Blood. And then there would be like a week to the 4th of July and Clarice could be like in little tiny Camp Half-Blood jail. And then Luke would leave and expose himself. I don't know how the timeline is going to work. I'm very confused. Obviously, also, at some point in the next episode, before Percy leaves alone for Olympus, Annabeth is going to take off her necklace and give it to Percy because in one of the trailers, he's seen going to Olympus with a full beaded necklace. And obviously, right now, he just has the letter cord. Annabeth probably gave it to him, and it does have the little ring from her father's college. So maybe then, when she gives it to him, is when Annabeth explains the regret and whatever. And then in the 4th of July ceremony with the fireworks, she's gonna be like, dude, you made me think more about my father, how you have to trust your family, give them second chances. I'm going back after the summer. I think that might be what happens. It's anybody's guess at this point. I think those are all my thoughts. Honestly, it was a bit of an underwhelming episode just because it's supposed to be the climax of the whole show. Like, we've been working up to this moment and then it's proved that none of the things that we knew were right, but it just feels a little bit underwhelming because there's absolutely no action to speak of besides Annabeth jumping and Percy and Grover falling. So yeah, so far my biggest constructive criticism is that there needs to be more action. And also, I don't need these flashbacks. I'm sorry, like, the actor for little Percy is adorable. Don't get me wrong, he is, but I don't need to see him. Like, I can imagine that his childhood was terrible. And also, I like Sally so far, even though she's a little bit dramatic going into the rain listening to Olivia Rodrigo, okay, who doesn't need a main character moment. So I forgive her. But even though I like her, I'm like, I don't need that. If we could get done with the flashbacks, I feel like getting Annabeth and Talia flashbacks would be so much more helpful, but we haven't gotten any of those. We'll probably get them in season 2. But still, yes, I need more action scenes, and I don't know, know, maybe more quotes from the book. That's something I'm missing. Like, I would have loved a bathtub reference. And I also need Percy to not know everything that is going on. I feel like maybe we'll get it in like the second season, but Percy said he read the graphic novel of the Iliad, so obviously he knows about Odysseus and his journey. So I don't know at this point, man. I don't want dumb Percy, but I want a Percy who doesn't know what's going on. That's what I want. What I feel we deserve. So I don't know how they're going to work that in season 2 if they want to change it, because obviously Percy knows. He knows his stuff. I'm not certain. But still, I'm enjoying it so far and I can't wait to watch the 8th episode and to be able to marathon them all in one afternoon and to get the whole experience, because I feel like these episodes were made to be binge watched and it's being very hard to watch just one per week. But please let me know what you think down below. Did you like this episode or was it your least favorite like mine? A lot of people hate episode 6, so I feel like this might be an improvement for them. Who knows? Please leave a like if you like this video and click subscribe if you haven't already. Click that bell button so you get notifications every time I post a new video. I post videos just like this, usually when I'm not doing reviews for this TV show, every single Friday. And I guess I'll see you guys next time with the finale. Bye!